watching a brand new edition of Gravitas. I'm Sana Khan. Our first story takes you to Pakistan, a historic day because for the first time the country's sitting premier was grilled by a graft probe panel. Denying any wrongdoing, Nawaz Sharif claimed some unseen elements were plotting against his democratically elected government. But his investigation is not only symbolic, it is extremely crucial for his political future as Pakistan heads into election next year. We take a closer look at the impact of the Panama investigations. We get into that in just a bit, but first, a quick check of the top stories. The joint investigation team probing Panama leaks grills Nawaz Sharif for over 3 hours. The first Pakistani Prime Minister to face such a humiliation. Has this dented his standing in Pakistan and the world? Isolated by America in the Gulf, but Qatar still means good business. Doha signs a $12 billion deal to buy F-15 fighters from the United States. Deadly blast at a kindergarten in China. Women and children among at least 7 were dead. Around 66 others are injured. And 26/11 repeat in the Somali capital. 31 killed as Al-Shabaab terrorists storm a restaurant and hold hostages. And coming up later on the show, at a time when Qatar is caught in a web of diplomatic isolation, the US and Qatar signed a $12 billion deal for F-15 combat jets. And vital military links remain. What does this business as usual mean in the larger scheme of things? And ever since Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain and Egypt turned their backs on Qatar, various global players have offered to step in. We take a look at their interests and examine how qualified they are at doing that. And should New Delhi step forward to untangle the crises around the world, for instance, the Qatari crisis? But we start with the big story first here on Gravitas. Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif appeared before a Supreme Court-appointed team probing the Panama Gate graft case. Following a nearly 3-hour-long grilling, Sharif told media personnel that his financial documents have been submitted to investigators probing his family's alleged corruption. Sharif also warned his detractors before the upcoming general elections. He said that people should not forget that there will also be a larger JIT next year comprising 200 million people. He was referring to the election, and they will decide who has worked for the betterment of the country.
आपको याद होगा कि तकरीबन 1.25 साल पहले मैंने पनामा लीक्स का मामला सामने आते ही सुप्रीम कोर्ट के जज साहिबान पर मुश्तमिल कमीशन कायम करने का ऐलान कर दिया था। अगर उस वक्त मेरी पेशकश को सियासी तमाशों और साजिशों की नजर ना किया जाता तो ये आज तक हल हो चुका होता।
Now, Nawaz Sharif has denied any wrongdoing by his family. He's alleged to have used offshore companies to buy luxury flats in a posh London neighborhood. But Sharif maintains that his family's wealth was acquired legally. In April, the Supreme Court ruled that there was insufficient evidence to remove Sharif from office based on the Panama Papers leaks, but it simultaneously ordered further investigations. The Supreme Court began the investigation after the main political parties failed to agree on a committee to probe the Panama Papers, and when the PTI chairman Imran Khan threatened mass protests to shut down Islamabad. Well, this probe panel has also summoned Sharif's brother and Punjab Chief Minister Shahbaz Sharif on the 17th of June. He has been charged of using his official position to try and misuse government machinery to hamper the probe into the ruling family's assets. All right, we'll try and talk in detail, go in depth as to what this interrogation means for Pakistan, for its leader Nawaz Sharif in the larger scheme of things. Joining me this evening on the show is Ambassador Vivek Kajju. He's a former Indian diplomat, joins me live from Delhi. WION's Pakistan Bureau Chief Taha Siddiqui is also live with us. Michael Kugelman, Senior Associate for the South Asia program from the Woodrow Wilson Center, is live with us from Washington. Mandy Clark joins us live from London, our bureau chief there. Thanks all of you for joining me this evening. Taha, I have to start with you first. Now, the Pakistani Prime Minister appearing in this investigation today before the GIT. How is this being seen in Pakistan?
Well, Sana, basically from what we are gathering here, this is basically an unprecedented step. First time ever, as you mentioned, that a sitting Prime Minister goes and sort of presents himself for accountability, so sending a message of upholding rule of law, saying that every citizen is equal before the law, which we haven't seen in the past. Usually the ruling elite have shied away from such accountability, have not appeared before the courts. We do know, for example, and in that sense, most of the time this is a sort of a civilian versus military affair too. Even right now, when if you look at all the Pakistani civilian leadership, they have usually appeared before this, before such courts, before such investigations in the past also, but the military dictators haven't. So a lot of people are also comparing it with that aspect, and also some people feel that just the very fact that Nawaz Sharif has been sort of grilled, which is a word that is being used as a spin, because in a way he was being called as a witness rather than an accused in this whole particular case. But the very fact that he had to come and present himself in front of the investigation team shows that he's finally being held accountable for all the corruption that his family might have done in the 90s, and he got away with it. Right. So definitely, I mean, an unprecedented thing, and for the first time happening. So a lot of people are actually appreciating Nawaz Sharif's step.
Right. Ambassador Kajju, bringing you into the discussion now, as Taha put it, it's being seen, it is an unprecedented move. Nawaz Sharif appearing before the Supreme Court appointed JIT. When the Panama Papers leaked, there was huge uproar. Many leaders, heads of states had to step down. In Pakistan, however, this investigation has carried on for quite some time now. It's being taken seriously. Well, that's the perception. How do you see this?
Well, in the first place, I think Nawaz Sharif did not voluntarily submit himself to scrutiny. He was ordered by the Supreme Court, and let us not forget that 2 of the 5 judges who heard this case, in fact, I think the senior most judges, had said that Nawaz Sharif was not qualified to be a member of parliament, that the constitutional provisions of he being a Sadiq and Amin were not fulfilled. It was only 3 judges who said that no further inquiries were needed about Nawaz Sharif's role in transferring money, in allegedly transferring money outside of Pakistan. So in the first place, I do not understand how he is appearing as a witness, because the accusations are against him directly, and the JIT is supposed to probe his role along with that of his family in this matter. So that is something that perhaps our Pakistani colleague on the panel can clarify. But let us also not forget that the military came out very strongly, all the corps commanders, led by the army chief after a corps commanders meeting, that the mandate given to the 2 members of the JIT who are from the ISI and the military intelligence will be fulfilled completely. And it was extraordinary that the corps commanders came into this. I'm told that they did because the DG ISI has family connections in some manner or form with some of Nawaz Sharif's relatives, or perhaps his daughter's relatives by marriage.
Right.
So all in all, I don't think Nawaz Sharif is scot-free. and he may make much politics out of it, but let us see what the JIT does.
In fact, I'll go to Taha and ask about the question that you raised, why is he being summoned as a witness when in fact he is the main accused? Michael, let me get you in as well. How is Washington looking at the developments in Pakistan, the world at large? We talked about several countries as leaders stepping down. So then the question was, should Nawaz Sharif have stepped down? Clearly he hasn't. He's facing a probe for which he's being questioned now.
Well, as you well know, we have a phenomenon here in Washington now called Donald Trump, and that essentially dominates all conversation and attention among everyone here, including policymakers. So certainly it's a small group of folks that are really paying attention to these developments with the JIT. Those of us that are paying attention to it, I think that we really shouldn't overstate the threat to Nawaz Sharif here. Certainly, he already dodged a pretty significant bullet when the Supreme Court, the Pakistani Supreme Court, essentially said that he did not need to be removed from office. And as your previous panelist said, certainly 2 judges did say that he was not fit to remain in office, but he dodged that bullet. I imagine he's going to dodge this bullet as well. At the least, there'll be another form of censuring from the Supreme Court. But I think at this point, those that are on this JIT, I imagine there are few there that would want to actually go through a process where they're willing to say that the Prime Minister needs to step down. Because again, Nawaz Sharif is not one of the accused. This is about his family. It's not about him. So I think that it's very unlikely that he'll have to step down. And in fact, at the end of the day, I imagine that he and his party will actually come out quite strongly. And his PMLN party will be in a position to win the next national election, which is in just under a year from now.
Ambassador Kharju, you want to come in very quickly and then we'll move forward.
No, the JIT flows from the case in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court case was on a plea that Nawaz Sharif was disqualified to hold to remain a member of Parliament because he did not fulfill the conditions of Article 62 and 63 of the Pakistani Constitution, which require that a member of Parliament should be Sadiq and Amin, which means that he must be honest and must be a man of integrity, and 2 of the 5 judges held that he was not so. So I do not understand that he was not an accused. Of course, the plea was against his continuance as a member of Parliament, and if he couldn't continue as a member of Parliament, he would not be qualified to be Prime Minister. That was the simple plea, and the JIT flows from this particular matter.
Absolutely. Got your point there, Ambassador Kharju. Now, there is a London connection clearly to the ongoing investigations. Mandy, before I come to you, the investigators, of course, we know are probing whether Nawaz Sharif did purchase one of the aspects, those 4 expensive flats in London. Mandy earlier today got us some reactions from London. Let's listen to what they have to say about this ongoing probe. All right, we seem to be having some audio difficulties over there. But Mandy, if I can ask you then straight away, what are people saying?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of the people I spoke to had a good knowledge of it. They're from the Pakistan British community, and they felt that corruption was endemic to politics. They didn't see him any different from a lot of previous politicians. But one person said, really when you're the leader of the country, you need to be essentially cleaner than clean. You have to be an example to the people that you are leading. So there isn't, a lot of people just felt, it's part of the curse with politicians, but others felt like you have to be example, you have to stand up and show that you are cleaner than most. Of course, it's not necessarily that he bought the properties. It is that a company that was owned in the offshore accounts.
Yeah. Okay, Mandy, thanks for that reaction. But Taha, coming back to you, the scrutiny of Nawaz Sharif, it has certainly gripped all of Pakistan, this investigation ordered by the Supreme Court. But an important question is it also become increasingly politicized?
Well, definitely. I mean, this is basically more about optics and more about the messaging that is coming out of it, and that is what the political opposition is using. They continuously say that Nawaz Sharif has lost moral authority. He cannot remain in office because there's a graft investigation going on against him. But here is what everybody has been discussing. The panelists earlier on were discussing also about whether or not this investigation is about Nawaz Sharif, or whether it is about his family. Now, there's a bit of a technicality here. Basically, the Panama Papers do not mention Nawaz Sharif himself. They mention his children, and they mention his children owning their offshore companies. Now, earlier on, when the investigations were happening at the Supreme Court, when the hearing was happening at the Supreme Court, Nawaz Sharif sort of maintained distance from his children. Of course, he is the father, and so they might have inherited that, but he produced papers, documents, which then later on the Supreme Court said needed further probe whether or not they were true or factual. But in that he said that this money was transferred directly from the grandfather to the grandchildren. So in that way he's sort of saying that the money skipped a generation, and because he was part of the politics, he did not inherit any money, and his children inherited money straight from the grandfather or from the royal family. So that is the sort of the perception that they're trying to create, and that is why Nawaz Sharif today, when he was appearing before the JIT, he was called in as a witness, as to sort of corroborate or give further evidence about his children's wealth.
Absolutely. Finding out more about the financial details there. That makes sense. Ambassador Kharju, I hope your question's been answered. But please stay on with me. Earlier today, Taha also spoke exclusively to Pakistani journalist Umar Chima, who is part of the Panama Papers investigation on the ongoing probe. Here's what he said.
I'm standing here with Mr. Umar Chima, who is a senior journalist and part of the Panama Leaks investigation in Pakistan. And we're discussing with him the very fact that the Pakistani Prime Minister appeared before the JIT today. What do you think about this, Mr. Umar Chima, that for the first time a sitting Prime Minister has appeared before the JIT? What kind of message does it send for the rule of law in the country?
The message is very loud and clear. Something unimaginable has happened. Many people dreamt of that, they dreamt of the day that when the top man of the country, he will be held to account. And when the accountability will start from the first family, and it has happened. And the process started earlier, and it has culminated at the appearance of the Prime Minister before the GIT today, as it happens. No doubt, it's a very historic day.
And when you were investigating this whole Panama investigation, can you tell us a little bit about a brief background of what are the allegations against the first family? If you can briefly sum up what is the Panama leaks in Pakistan, what does it mean for the common man, what's the understanding behind it?
Well, there are more than 400 people from Pakistan who were identified in connection with the offshore companies from the Panama Papers documents. So the most prominent among them, the most prominent of them was the Sharif family, Prime Minister's children. They were found owning companies. Two were in the name of his daughter. One each was in the name of his sons. So they have been under investigation since then. They purchased apartments in London. They are living. They have been. The apartment are in their custody for a long time, for more than 20 years, and the ownership they have been denying since. But this is for the first time they have accepted that they own the apartments. So now the court had asked them that please explain the money trail, that what was the source of income, that how did you purchase the apartment. So this was really challenging for the first family, and this is what has brought them before the GIT, that they are offering their explanation, and the investigation team has called in, has summoned their tax record of the past, their business record, how they have been doing. So, it's all about their money trail and their money profile, that just to, they are trying to reach to a conclusion that how transparent they are, or whether there is any tainted money involved, or whether there is anything they cannot explain.
And one final question. What do you think this means for the political career of the Sharif family? We know that the Sharifs have been in power, in politics for a very long time. Does it mean it's the end of the line for them? Because some people think that now they have been exposed, they have no moral standing left to be in politics. What do you think, from an analytical point of view, do you think Sharifs have a political future?
I think it's a difficult question. Writing off Sharif, it's very risky that whether the Panama Papers will bury their politics, will they be out of it? I don't think it's going to happen very soon. Also, for the reason because whether there are competing options for the public to go as an alternative for the Sharifs, that must be a bad news for the Sharifs. But I don't think there are so many options. So and hopefully. And most likely they are going to stay, and many believe at the moment, at this point of time, many think that they might win the next election as well. So
that was Mr. Umar Chima, senior journalist and part of the Panama investigation team in Pakistan.
All right, Taha Siddiqui there speaking to Umar Chima. Well, Ambassador Kardju, then I'll take on from one of the sound bites there in that interview. Should Nawaz Sharif then step down? Because he's right now being seen as somebody who's clinging on to power, somebody who's been accused of money laundering, not directly but indirectly. Credibility, don't you think, has already taken a blow?
Look, I don't think Nawaz Sharif will voluntarily step down. He has too much at stake politically. But yes, if the JIT enters an adverse finding or conveys an adverse finding to the Supreme Court about the role of his children and the Sharif family in transfer of assets abroad, right, not in keeping with the laws of Pakistan, then I think Nawaz Sharif will have no option but to step down, and the next election he will fight, but he'll fight with one hand tied behind his back, because while his hold on the Sharif's hold on the Punjab, and Punjab is the only province in Pakistan that matters politically, is still very firm. But his political opponents, especially Imran Khan, will sense an opportunity.
Right.
So the game will get open if the JIT finds some evidence against the
family.
family.
Many questions come to mind,
even if it is not Nawaz Sharif.
As you just said, whether Imran Khan, for instance, its party PTI, will be able to fill in the vacuum that will be created after that, or maybe has even started, to shape up. But Michael, if I can come to you, let's try and then draw a parallel. You have Nawaz Sharif facing an inquiry. You may have Donald Trump tomorrow deposing before Robert Mueller in the ongoing investigations that we're seeing over there. What are leaders then? It changes the perception, of course. There have been calls of Donald Trump's for his impeachment as well. How severely do you think these kind of cases dent the credibility, the position of power that these leaders hold?
Well, it's interesting that you bring up that analogy between the two leaders. I have heard a number of comparisons between Nawaz Sharif and Donald Trump, but particularly in the context of how they both seem to really depend on their families, close family members, to play a key role in their administrations. I mean, but at the same time, though, we are looking at two very different cases. I think that with Trump, you're looking at, as I understand it, the fact that this investigation is looking at possible obstruction of justice, which is a much more serious charge than with what Nawaz Sharif is dealing with, which is the
That's right.
The practices of his family, for sure. That said, I think that Nawaz Sharif, the worst possible outcome for him would be that the Supreme Court essentially rules that he needs to step down. And I think in that case, he would not resist. I think this is a politician that's a bit more mellow than he used to be some years ago when he was prime minister previously. I imagine he would step down if he was told that he needed to, so to speak. And his party would essentially appoint a new prime minister to serve out the last year what would essentially be the last year of this government's term. I don't think we would have early elections. I don't think we'd have anything like that. So it's really, very few potential really bad outcomes for the Prime Minister. But certainly, if the outcome were negative and if the Supreme Court ruled that he was no longer fit to govern, his moral credibility would be shot, to be sure. But then again, he's not necessarily a hugely popular leader in Pakistan right now. He certainly is popular. And as I said before, if there were an election today, I imagine his party would win it, quite frankly, not the PTI.
Right. In fact, quite contrary to what we're seeing in America, if you were to go by the opinion polls, Nawaz Sharif opinion polls say still enjoys majority. And as you said, if elections were to be held today, he would win at this point. But Mandy, you've been tracking the story since the very beginning, since the Panama leaks happened. You visited those properties which are in a very upmarket area in London. When we talk about Nawaz Sharif being indirectly involved in buying these kind of properties in his children's name, how difficult or easy do you think does that make his case? Because this area is posh and these properties very, very expensive.
They are the top area in London to have property. And one of those properties, he had hosted Benazir Bhutto. So it's not that he was completely separate from these properties. He does, even though he has not been directly linked to own it, it's his family's, he certainly has made use of them. So he is ultimately intertwined with these they're multi-million pound properties. They're worth an incredible amount of money. And the question and the problem that we often see when it comes to London property market, it's an incredibly high value property market, and we see a lot of what we call money laundering. Normally the accusation becomes with those Russian oligarchs when they have taken money from Russia, bought property, but we've seen it in other cases as well. And I think ultimately that is the main question about the purchase of it. Has this been money that should have been used for tax that has ultimately been laundered?
Indeed. Taha, coming to you, we do know it was a 60-day time limit that was set on this JIT probe. I think about 20 to 21 days of that remain at this point. Now, we understand something immediate might not come out of this, at this point in time after the investigations. But does that leave Nawaz Sharif weakened is another question. Election approaching next year. Will Imran Khan's PTI, will he be able to fill in the vacuum then?
Definitely. I mean, the way this is being carried out, Sana, basically the Prime Minister's family and Prime Minister's party politically dented. The opposition is definitely using this, mainly Imran Khan. They have been using this last whole year, and they want to stretch it further on. Now, whether or not anything is expected out of basically some analysts that I've spoken to here, they say that because of this, as I was saying earlier, technicality between Nawaz Sharif saying that it's not his wealth, it's not his assets, he was not named in it, and his children might basically be, who are not part of politics, for Nawaz Sharif will be in trouble, which might have taken over the leadership party. But now Nawaz Sharif seems to be eventually.
Right. Right, Taha, there seems to be some issue with your audio link there suddenly. I'll try and come back to you in just a bit, but I got the gist of what you were trying to say over there. Ambassador Kajju, it's interesting how people in Pakistan are looking at this probe. For instance, Sharif supporters, they look at it as something, it's a great thing that is happening. He is cooperating with the investigation team, even though he has no choice really in the matter. The others say that this brings him one step closer to his ouster. How do you read the situation? We also talked about the opinion polls which say that yes, PMLN is the most popular party right now in Pakistan.
No, there is no doubt in my mind that the Sharifs are the most powerful political family, and the party is a family party in Pakistan. On that there is no doubt. But if the JIT report goes against the family, then the Sharifs will be dented. There are two issues which arise. How much will they be dented in the popular mind or in the public mind? And secondly, how will the corps commanders and the army chief react? That is an issue which is always present in Pakistan. This is especially because they've said that a mandate has been given to them by the Supreme Court to conduct an honest investigation.
Right.
And I think this is one issue that we haven't taken up today, which is the complaint of the JIT to the Supreme Court that the institutions, which are civilian institutions, are not cooperating or in fact they are forging documents, they are misleading the JIT. That is a very serious charge and goes directly to the Sharif administration and the Sharif government. How will the court react to this? We don't know. So there are many imponderables which have come up in Pakistani politics at the moment.
Right, right. Valid point there, Ambassador Kaju. Then, Michael, from your end, what is your understanding? We know the involvement, the kind of transparency that one would hope from these kind of probes, which is utmost important. Do you think, looking at these various factors at play in Pakistan, this could well be a zero-sum game then?
Well, yeah, there certainly is something to be said for the importance of transparency. And the interesting thing is I've heard a number of Pakistani commentators over the last week or so talking about how the congressional testimony of James Comey, the former FBI director here, was televised on just about every U.S. television channel under the sun. And they suggested, well, why wasn't this appearance by Nawaz Sharif before the JIT? Why was that not public? Why was that not broadcast? Interesting point. Different cases, but an interesting point. I'll just say this, that, for all that I've said about how the PMLN should be okay, no matter how this ends up, its prospects in the elections are pretty solid. This is a political party that's operating in a particularly precarious time, and I say that because, as I understand it, though Taha may be able to weigh on in this more than I, there are some internal debates within the PMLN party about the party's future, about who could be taking up the mantle of leadership of the party after Nawaz Sharif. There's talk about Nawaz Sharif's daughter, Mariam, and of course Sharif's brother, Shabazz, continues to be strong. So as I understand it, there's some uncertainty about the direction the party could take. And if you have the Supreme Court weighing in a way that an outcome that's negative for the party,
right,
that could make the internal deliberations a bit more troublesome. But the bottom line is that no matter how this plays out, I think that the narratives of the main opposition party, the PTI, are strengthened because they've been arguing for so long that Pakistan
right,
is run by these family political dynasties that are corrupt. And of course, regardless of whether Nawaz himself was involved in any of this, his kids have been accused of being involved in these activities.
And in fact, it will be interesting to see how this investigation pans out a couple of days before that deadline expires of the JIT probe. And more interesting than that, how will politics in Pakistan shape in the lead up to the next election, or will there be an early election? What will happen? That's all going to be very interesting. We'll have to wrap up at this point. Thanks so much, Ambassador Kaju, Michael Kugelman, Taha Siddiqui and Mandy Clark for joining us this evening on Gravitas. Time for a quick break here. When we return, we talk about the $12 billion military deal and the diplomatic tangle between the United States and Qatar. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.